So just so you all know, you're being recorded. I'm gonna drop this on our YouTube channel probably, or somewhere where they can store it in 1 hour videos, or just in a drive, and I will get the link out to all of our members. So my name is Logan Schrader. I am the executive director of the Energy Center of Excellence. We are part of Minnesota State, and that is Minnesota State College and Universities. Um, our job as a Center of Excellence is to work through workforce challenges with industry and education partners to try and come up with pathways, pipelines, career awareness activities, but also upskilling, reskilling, and kind of that professional development side too, for industry partners, contractors, nonprofits, folks from all over the state. Essentially, our hope is to build a really strong Minnesota workforce ecosystem where we're supporting each other in our initiatives, and using our resources strategically. Today, we have folks from DEED. Molly and Katie have joined us. They're going to give a little bit of an overview. Another resource that I wanted to shout out today too is CEEM, the Clean Energy Economy of Minnesota, also put out their workforce report. Those are just clean energy jobs, not all energy jobs. And I love that we have that data, and I'm grateful that there's more data to share too. So I'll let Molly and Katie take it from here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Logan. Hi, all. I'm Molly. I am a senior research specialist at DEED's Labor Market Information Office, and I am going to do the first half of the presentation on the data. Katie, do you want to do your intro now?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Katie McClelland. I am the director of the Governor's Workforce Development Board and lead strategic workforce initiatives at DEED, and working closely with Minnesota State and the Centers of Excellence on a number of projects. But yeah, really happy to be here. Molly is our data whiz, so she will be going through all of the data, and then I'll be providing a little bit of additional context on how we're using some of this data and other ways that we might want to engage moving forward.
Awesome. So here's my plan for my half. I'm going to walk you through what we know now, where the data is coming from, and I'm glad Logan brought up the CEEM because I will tell you exactly where those numbers come from. I'm going to talk to you about what do we know is coming down the pipeline and where our current kind of research is at, and when you can expect to see it and what it involves. And then Katie, you'll take over and talk to you more specifics about the workforce development piece. So the numbers that you see on energy employment, if specifically, are probably almost always coming from this US Department of Energy USEER report, their energy employment report, and they release it annually. So then they just released, they're always lagged a year behind. So their report that just came out last month is the 2023 numbers. And what they do is they take industry employment, run a survey of, a statistically, representative sample of different energy providers based on different technologies and into these energy sectors that they specifically care about. So these first three are their, what they call the traditional, then they include energy efficiency and motor vehicles as kind of main end use sectors. And so the reason why they do that is because, so I've got a graph here of energy jobs by industry, and you can see these are, if you look at normal employment numbers, these are the types of industries you'll see. So construction, manufacturing, pipeline transportation, but energy, is split across all of these. And so the Department of Energy was like, well, this is useful, but it's not actually what we need to be the most applicable and actionable. So let's, collect our own data and try to split this out into more detail. And so this is kind of what you get. So here's the growth in these different energy sectors between 2022 and 2023. You can see it averages to about 3%. 4% growth is if you look at the clean portion of it. And it's about on par, with Minnesota's, state employment growth rates. And here are these jobs split out then by sector. So you can see all energies in the green, clean energies in this blue. Energy efficiency, everything's clean. Motor vehicles, some of it's clean. Power generation, a bit over half's clean. Transmission distribution, a tiny bit's clean. I'll talk to you more about what counts towards clean in this next slide. And fuels, an even smaller portion is clean. But you can see, I mean, energy efficiency is a big one. The kind of traditional sectors are a bit smaller than these two end use. So what do they mean when they say clean? The US Department of Energy, in their USEER report, they define clean as jobs in net zero emissions technologies. And they do, if you look at their reports, they do include a state level number for clean energy jobs, but it is not the same number that you see when you look at this Clean Jobs Midwest or this Center for Clean Economy Midwest. And the reason is it's a little bit of a black box what goes into the Department of Energy's number. They say in their document, you know, at the state level, it's harder to split things out by technology, you know, traditional transmission, distribution, storage. It's not easy to split those out between, are they transmitting energy that came from clean or from non-clean, et cetera. So what CEEM and this Clean Jobs Midwest, Clean Jobs America does is they take a subset of those clean energy jobs as defined by the Department of Energy. And I think maybe the easiest way to think about it is they do clean as being low emissions or like low carbon and renewable. So under power generation, you'll notice they don't include nuclear. Under fuels, they don't include corn ethanol. Like transmission, distribution, storage, clean there is mostly kind of storage, batteries, and smarter grids, updating grids. And then motor vehicles, they, at the national level, they split these out by technology. At the state level, it's all lumped together in motor vehicles. So there's some, you know, when you see that 62,000 number that's, you know, being shown everywhere for clean energy jobs, just like this is helpful to have in the back of your mind to know what is and is not included. So for example, another one that's maybe you won't think of is traditional hydropower does not get included in the set of clean jobs, only low impact. Anyway, so things to keep in mind. So what does this look like? Where are these jobs located around the state? Here is the amount of all energy jobs by county. You can see, you know, because of the size, because it's a population center, most jobs are located in the metro area. Same thing if you look at just the clean energy jobs. But if you look at this third map on the right, this share of clean energy jobs, you can see that actually it's not, the share of clean energy jobs is much more varied across the state. So in some states, there's, you know, nearly all of the jobs are clean energy jobs. So it's not quite as, you know, metro, urban, you know, metro statistical area kind of driven as you might think. So how do these jobs break out across these different categories? So here's the maps for electricity generation. And the gray ones don't necessarily mean that there's no jobs in those counties. What it means is there's less than 10. And so that data gets suppressed by the Department of Energy. So you can see it's a mix of, you know, how many energy jobs there are out there. Again, metro area has the biggest, but if you look at the share of generation, you can see some, you know, some areas of the state, most of the, you know, jobs or a bigger chunk are from generation as opposed to other types of energy. So the energy efficiency, motor vehicles, et cetera. And then clean, you know, we have a smaller subset, but what's interesting for the share of clean energy generation jobs is that in some counties, you can see from this map in the lower right, all of their energy generation jobs are clean. These dark red ones, they don't have any energy generation jobs that aren't considered clean. So transmission, distribution, storage, it's, again, you see the most in the population centers. It's not a huge, it's not accounting for a huge share of jobs in energy. So most of these are in the kind of lower shares. But what is perhaps interesting is for the clean transmission, distribution, storage jobs, so those are related to kind of storage and grid modernization, those are pretty much only in the Duluth area and the Twin Cities area. And so hopefully, that's something that you'd see spread out across the rest of the state in the coming years. Oops. So fuel jobs, those are, again, spread out in the state. It's a mixed bag, whether most of the jobs in energy in a county are fuel, related, or, are from other subsectors of the energy economy. But again, clean jobs or clean fuel jobs are concentrated in the southern part, and they represent a significant share of the fuel jobs in these areas. So I think this kind of sector is one to keep your eye on in terms of kind of upcoming technology, innovation, projects being funded through the federal money, with state money. I know there's a lot of discussion on the state side around, anaerobic digestion and hydrogen, and what are other things we can take advantage of. So I think this is another place where things will be growing over the coming, decades. So energy efficiency jobs, all energy efficiency is counted as green. You can see they're everywhere in the state, and how much that energy efficiency accounts for total energy employment in a county can vary pretty widely. Across the entire state, it's about a third. And so you can see most of the counties are about that spot in this kind of light blue. But in some counties, over half of the jobs are all energy efficiency jobs. And this is another one where I think we can expect to see significant growth as we put a big emphasis on, finding low-hanging fruit, ways of reducing emissions. So motor vehicles, again, this doesn't get split out into clean or not clean. It's just, it's how it is at the state level. But I can tell you some of the bigger increases between the 2022 and 2023 employment is coming from, kind of the clean motor vehicles, which I don't think, is a surprise to anyone. So what do we know about what's coming? One of the things I'm working on, and I'll talk about a little bit more in a few slides, is I'm working on a workforce analysis for the state's climate action framework update that's currently happening. You might have seen emails about it or heard other people talk about it. And some of the big targets, ambitious targets that Minnesota has set, is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2023 relative to the 2005 level. For the energy sector specifically, 100% carbon free and 55% renewable electricity by 2040, and economy-wide net zero emissions by 2050. We have some kind of preliminary greenhouse gas emissions forecasting numbers that I've seen batted around the last few weeks. And even in best case scenarios, it is going to be a really big challenge to reach net zero by 2050. On the plus side, the energy sector is ahead of you know, a lot of the rest of the state. So if 55% is our goal for 2040, here's where we currently are. So right now we're at 32% of the energy generation is coming from renewable, mainly solar and wind. Those are the big ones. So here you can see, again, these are from the SEER report. You know, clean is a big chunk, a bit over half of total energy generation. Solar and wind are the next biggest, and the kind of more heavy emissions ones are lower down. One of the things that I am thinking about more in my work is, you know, yes, solar and wind are higher now. Is that because they'll always be higher, or is some of this driven up because right now we're in a lot of the infrastructure expansion phase, and do we expect this to stay long run? That's something that I'm actively thinking about and working on. But bottom line, like, this is pretty good news for, you know, where we are at and our ability to meet this goal, you know, in the next 15-ish years. But so trying to get a sense of what do things need to be at in the coming years. I don't have Minnesota numbers yet. I think if you are keeping up with the Climate Action Framework update, you will know that there is a draft document being released around November 7th that will give some updates on where the greenhouse gas emissions modeling is. But for now, what I can show you is forecasting done by MISO. And, you know, this is their region, so Midwest. So these numbers aren't specific to Minnesota, but the big takeaway is that, you know, from our current energy mix, wind has to do a massive amount of growth to meet kind of our demands. Solar as well, but wind is really the big one. And so that's something we know for sure going forward. Like, I even though I don't have the exact numbers and I can't show you the figures for Minnesota yet, I can tell you that they're consistent with this pattern. That this is where we expect to see a lot of growth expansion happening. So from a workforce side, you know, what do we want to know and where is that going to come from? One of the priority actions Minnesota had in its original climate action framework was to do a workforce and economic development plan, and that is what I'm currently working on. So we know we've got these goal chapters. A big one for energy is this clean energy and efficient buildings. And what I am working on now is industry occupation split outs with employment, with wages, with projections. What does that look like across demographics, across regions? I think one of the things that might be of most interest to you is we've got permission to use the SLEDS, the State Longitudinal Education Database, to specifically look at pathways into these different career paths. So I think that, you know, when that result comes out, I'm happy to talk to you more about it. As part of this work as well, I've talked about this a little bit, we've got the greenhouse gas emissions forecasting. We are going to link that into some economic forecasting to try and get some rough estimates on jobs, and given Minnesota's tight labor market, is this feasible? What would we need to do to get there? So here's kind of the outcomes for you to expect, like, you know, maybe a year from now, around there. We'll have policy recommendations. You may have already seen this, but the most recent kind of sector recommendations I know of are this Minnesota Business Vitality Council. Examples of current approaches. So I know across the state and in other states, people have taken different paths. So I want to highlight some that work well, or, you know, some caveats, some pitfalls. I'll have sector specific reports. We've promised to do a data dashboard. Like I said, if you've already heard about this climate action framework, then just, you know, like, zone out for a little bit. If you haven't and you want to know more, here's the link. And if you, depending on kind of what areas of the state you work in, Minnesota has other recipients of this planning funding. So here are the other locations in Minnesota that I know are also actively working on their workforce development plans, which may include kind of energy related jobs. I'm the one leading the workforce analysis for Met Council, so I can talk a bit more about that, but I know there are some tribal communities as well. So yeah, so that's where we are on the data side and where we hope to be a year from now. And I'll hand it over to Katie.
Thanks, Molly. So one of the roles that the governors work for, and maybe if you want to just advance the slide, that would be great too. So one of the roles that we have and the Governor's Workforce Development Board is trying to help coordinate workforce development challenges or workforce development needs across all of our federal infrastructure investment acts, and thinking about how we can make sure that we're prioritizing and preparing as necessary for these transitions. I think one thing that we're and will likely continue, or we are working with Molly on, is both doing analysis for this for a lot of projects, but then also thinking about how we are incorporating prioritization around clean or green jobs and like coding that, especially on the construction side as well, because that is a little bit more challenging. But the first step of all this is just understanding where the money is coming in. So as you all likely know, Minnesota Management and Budget houses a website that shows where all of the federal funds are coming into the state. There's summary information, project tracking, and then they have a map on where funds are going. As of now, we've gotten just shy of $3 billion. And so a lot of this is in the realm of where clean energy or transportation resilience are. But again, a lot of this is also we've done some analysis with our labor market information team on, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. A lot of this is in the construction space as well. So thinking about how we're kind of preparing, or the alignment of all of this work to come together. EPA also just awarded $200 million to Minnesota on climate pollution in food systems. And so again, maybe Molly, going to the next slide, we have taken a step now of trying to understand, based on the number or the money that is coming in, where the jobs are going to be. So everything that I'm showing now is in that federal funding website. There will be another platform that will likely be released mid-November. That's really showing where this job breakdown is, where the occupations will be. And we've done it both by region within the state to try to support some workforce planning. So if you click on the different regions, you'll see things like Arrowhead, for example, is the darkest green right now because they have the Blatnick Bridge project, which was funding that has already been awarded. And in this little green and blue circle, the green represents the money that's come in and been awarded to projects, which makes the numbers for those regions much more clear and much more real. The blue is funding that we're expecting but has not come into the state yet. So this dashboard will continue to evolve as we're moving forward. And as it gets more green, the numbers on the panel on the right there will get more real. And so and I'm intentionally, you can't really see the numbers. That is intentional. We don't want to release anything yet, as we're just doing all of our final checks, and also in the business of not making any news for the next couple of weeks. So this will all be accessible to you all. And one thing I'll say too is that we really will view this as kind of a work in progress. So as this comes out, we'll likely have a webinar providing more detail and going a little bit more in analysis, but we'll also be looking for feedback from you all on how this tool can be most useful. And again, the top part of the data here is showing kind of the sectoral clusters. And then if you click on them, underneath we'll give more occupational specific information. And then if we go to the next slide, we've also created or one of the occupation data here shows where there are the highest numbers and the average education, wages, things like that for each of the occupations that are going to be supported or added by these federal funding initiatives. The thing that I think we should keep in mind the most is this far right column on the projected difficulty to fill. So we're kind of thinking about these as like red lights versus green lights. And you'll see a number of these are going to be very challenging to fill based on the numbers that need to be there. So we're hoping that we can, really focus on prioritizing that work. One thing that I think is very cool about our dashboard as compared to some of the other states that have developed it is if you click on any of these occupations, like if you clicked on construction laborers, and Molly, if you want to go to the next slide, it brings you to the career force site. So it shows you a more detailed occupational analysis for each of these. It has, and I kind of put two screens together here, but as you scroll down this page, hopefully you all are somewhat familiar with the career force occupational profiles, but it shows, the expected wages, the cost of living, general education, certification, licensing information. It also has more skills and competencies, which will hopefully be helpful in developing out like what any kind of training programs or things related to that. So some of the next steps with this, if you want to go to the next slide. So we'll have this dashboard coming out, and we also at the GWDB got a grant for something called Powering Climate and Infrastructure Careers. And so we will be doing regional convenings over the next, and I should have education partners on here. I can't believe that I don't. But over the next coming months, we are starting to kind of socialize that this is work that's coming up, because we will be supporting regional convenings with partners across the state where we dive a little bit more into this information on a regional specific basis. We're really trying to think through how we can be equitably growing this workforce. So we will have information on the demographics of both the existing workforce, the local labor force, so that we can be seeing where there are gaps between the existing workforce and the local labor force, and trying to support the development of workforce plans for the region and how to get to an equitable pathway for creating or for training for other things to get to this, to get to a place where we have strong talent pipelines that are equitable and inclusive. And so some of the things that we're doing at the state to also support that is there's $100 million at DEED, $100 billion in relevant grants for the Clean Economy Equitable Workforce Development grants. That was actually, there's a $600,000 match by the McKnight Foundation for those grantees. We've got our targeted populations grants, and then also the Youth Workforce Development Fund. One thing to note is we do have the Minnesota Forward Fund at DEED. So this is a fund that was created to specifically support matching federal investments that are, or a state match for federal investments that are coming into the state. Most of this money is not workforce development specific. The money that is around the CHIPS and Science Act. So we are trying to leverage that. We're working again with Minnesota State on what that looks like to ensure that we're creating new opportunities that are going to be scalable, both in the metro region where there's a lot of chips manufacturers. We're actually expanding out a chips partnership to include medical device, or the MedTech 3.0, our tech hub, which is going to really be focused on trying to address manufacturing needs in the microelectronic space, which is not just chips specific, but so that's some of the workforce work that we're doing there. And then the Energy Transition Office is also within DEED is supporting fossil fuel power plant community transition. So they've got $5 million for that. At DLI, they have Clean Economy Apprenticeship grants and also expanding equity in apprenticeship grants. So both of those will be and can be leveraged to try to create stronger pathways into the clean economy. And then one other state investment that was made is in the Minnesota Energy Alley. There's $3 million. That's a partnership, and you all may know this too, but partnership between or public-private partnership with the state, Clean Energy Economy Minnesota, and Grid Catalyst. So those are some of the big investments that we've been making as a state. One of the other things that we'll be doing as we do some of this regional planning around kind of the climate and infrastructure careers is thinking and trying to better understand what funding is needed at the local level to be supporting some of this workforce work. There has been, in all of the federal investments, very limited requirements about withholding funds for workforce development. So there have been limited coordinated approaches to holding funding aside for workforce development. So we're working with the governor's office on that, and we'll again be working with our local and regional partners to better understand where the needs are to help make sure that we do have this equitable opportunity to be moving into these new careers. I realized that we probably should have stopped before Molly, before I dove in to see if there were questions for Molly too, because she gave so much information. So maybe I'll pause and see if you all have questions for kind of either of us.
Hi there, this is Emily Belt, and I'm the Workforce Training Coordinator at the Department of Commerce, really helping with residential energy program incentives and things right now. I'm super curious about the work that's being done in partnership with DLI about the apprenticeship and where that further detail or program leader could be accessed so they can make connections.
Yeah. So Erin Larson is the head of the Office of Apprenticeship at DLI, and she is fantastic and will be the best person. They have a lot of or the apprenticeship representatives cover different sectors, and so she'll be able to point you to the right folks. But I will say from my experience, they have been absolutely amazing, really great at working with partners on creating new programs. The other thing is that we are working with DLA right now in identifying for the occupations of focus that I mentioned in slide 20. We're working with them to analyze where there are already programs in existence, where there are who the sponsors are, opportunities for scale, expansion, all of that. And so that'll be part of the regional meetings that we have as well. And as we kind of provide a little bit more detail there, because we're definitely aware of a lot of, Emily, you probably know this too, but a lot of the federal funding opportunities do include apprenticeship incentives. And so we're trying to make sure that we have information available to help align that work as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's just really exciting to see that we're gaining some momentum on all fronts.
Yeah, it's definitely and we are hopefully soon kind of building out our team at Deed that's working on this. And to be honest, I went on maternity leave for a couple of months or a few months. So some of the momentum stalled a little bit, but I'm back, we're hiring folks, and we're excited that, thank you. We're excited that this work is really kind of picking up and moving a little faster. But yes, if there are like general coordination questions on workforce development activities, we don't necessarily at the GWDB, we don't actually, I sometimes say like, we don't do anything. We don't do programs. We don't do all of this, but our role is really to help connect the dots to the people who do. So like connecting with Molly to help supporting all of the analysis, or our LMI team generally supporting this analysis, or working with Department of Labor and Industry to understand where those needs are, or working with other agencies. And we're really partnering with MMB for all of this because they're kind of the main overall leads for any kind of federal infrastructure needs. But then they're close workforce partners. And they also had, I think, some transitions in leadership. So Leah Curry is now leading that office. She just started a week or two ago. So we're excited about that too. So yes, I think we're back in the path of strong forward progress.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and congrats on your baby. I hope you're not rushed too far and too fast back into it, because I can only imagine the need for speed is real right now. Thank you.
It is, yeah. And yes, I also have a 2-year-old, so I feel like I'm just going at all cylinders all of the time, but everything is important and exciting. Other questions for Molly too on any of the data that she shared?
The only thing I was thinking about is for Molly, I'm wondering where EV infrastructure technicians, so like charging infrastructure, where do they live in this? Are they lumped under motor vehicles? Because I know some of our programs that have EV programs are doing charger trainings, but then some of our electrical programs are going to start doing charger trainings with high voltage installation. And so that's technically an infrastructure and construction job. Thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think that they would live under motor vehicles because motor vehicles is mainly around the manufacturing components and full-on vehicles. So I think they they in theory, I guess maybe someone at DOE would say maybe we put them under transmission, distribution, storage. But I think this is a kind of gets at one of the caveats for these energy employment numbers is that they, in order to go from industry level data into specific technologies, into specific energy sectors, they have to do a lot of background work where they send out a sample to some subset of businesses. And so these, essentially these are, they're good estimates, but these data are estimates based on, to the best of our knowledge. And what I'm hoping where we can get to for Minnesota is using kind of a more detailed universe of data coming from so the most accurate information you can get on employment is coming from the unemployment insurance kind of reporting. And so that covers over 90% of employment in Minnesota and in the US, but that's all split out by industry. So one of the things I'm working with people on as part of this climate action framework work is what specific industries do you really want to care about? So if you're looking at transportation, can you go to one place and find not just, the road construction, but also this charging infrastructure, vehicles? So I'm hoping to kind of get this information structured in a way that's easier to answer some of those questions and access, because you're right, that's a maybe a caveat to some of this stuff is it can be a little bit black boxy. So yeah, I guess another thing to know about the USEER report is that it is only including what they call direct jobs. So for example, with solar panels, it includes installation. It does not include, component manufacturing, things like that. So I guess, maybe on a like silver lining, that means these are probably underestimates of the people who are actually impacted and involved in, the energy economy.
One thing that I'll add, and Molly, I actually just sent you an email about this
Okay.
too, is so as part of a grant that I mentioned that the GWDB got on powering climate and infrastructure careers, we are part of a cohort of a few states that are really looking more into this. And one of the components is going to be on technical assistance for labor market information, including like identification of this, identifying career pathways, skills, competencies, things like that. And so as there are questions like you just brought up, Logan, or other folks have, that may be a helpful thing to be emailing Molly and I about, because as I've kind of broached some of these questions with the grantees, and this grant is from something called like the Amalgamated Foundation. So they're getting funding from a bunch of different funders, but working closely with USDOL and Department of Commerce and others to kind of support states' infrastructure work. And it sounds like no one has super clear answers at this point, unfortunately, on all of this. And so part of the goal for this few state collaborative is that we'll be working together to try to get to some answers. Another component of this grant and the partnership that we're doing is also around good jobs and trying to ensure that we're embedding good jobs principles into the opportunities that are coming through all of this infrastructure funding. And a challenge there too is just even on metrics for how are we measuring good jobs and what does that look like? And it appears that we're also on the forefront of that. And oftentimes I've heard that Minnesota seems to be further ahead than other places. And I think in Minnesota, we're always like, why isn't there an answer for this already? So I think we are going to continue to be the people that are trying to find the answers. But as you all have questions, it's really helpful if you're including or sending those our way so we can at least be trying to work with other state partners, other national partners on trying to get some answers so that we can have the highest quality data, the highest quality opportunities we can.
And I will say, kind of to that point, Katie and I, so I'm doing a lot of the data for the workforce analysis, but Katie and I kind of built into that work. We are working together to make sure that information gets disseminated. We have feedback. The Climate Action Framework kind of planning grant goes all the way until 2027. So we've got space and, ability to make sure we're getting information to you and then getting the feedback back from you to make sure that this is actually the information you need.
Yeah, and that's the same with this, the PKIC grant that I've been talking about. It's a few-year grant to really try to help us build more infrastructure and capacity to understand and address all of these. So we are, yes, I think really ramping up as was said earlier. And the more feedback that we can get from you all right now on what's helpful, I think the better too.
I was going to say thank you for asking the questions because I know Goodwill is definitely interested in drilling more down on solar and EVSE and heat pump. And I think just in working with Goodwill International and them asking, so what's going on the local level and being very difficult to like piece those apart. Yeah, drilling down would be super helpful.
Yeah, and Logan, I was thinking maybe like as a next step too, folks could follow up with you and you could I maybe even like combine all of the questions that you all have at the Center of Excellence that folks on this call have, and then work with Molly and I as we either try to provide answers now or find things that we should be asking as part of kind of the work that we have coming up to get other states' perspectives or national perspectives on how to answer some of these and make sure that we're building the right data sets that are helpful for folks and building plans to address those different areas of focus.
I have a question for the audience. So one of the things that I'm just not sure about, and I've heard other sectors talk about it. I'm curious what the demands you see for kind of these education opportunities, if they're coming from businesses that want their current employees to be upskilling on this, and so they seek out the different programs that Minnesota State's network of schools has, or if it's driven more from people wanting to get into it kind of from their own information and interest into it. I'm curious what that breakdown looks like. Because I will say, so on the kind of innovation around plastics and materials, what I'm hearing from different technical colleges and things is that the demand is coming from employers first. So I guess I'm just wondering if that's the same thing that's driving a lot of these energy changes, and if so, is there adequate workforce development funding targeted at employers versus targeted at individuals? Because I know Minnesota DEED has this job skills partnership that I hear people talk about all the time, but it's only one program. And so I think its capacity gets maxed out. And I guess my question is, should there be more support for employer oriented, training as opposed to individual oriented, if that makes sense?
I can speak to this. Hi, Molly. My name's Emily Belt. I would say that yes, both sides really need to be approached because especially what we're seeing in the residential energy sector is that the needs for heat pump technology training are massive in the state if we're going to respond to these large home energy rebates that are coming into play in the future years here. But contractors are still leery about the technology. Contractors still report challenges with the technology, much less the client ed side of the technology that's got a huge component of functionally building in before it can work and really save people money in their homes. So I see a huge need for education on both sides. And part of that looks like supporting employers. One way that our program is looking into this is to potentially set aside some funding for an apprenticeship style program. We're still not quite ready to formalize the apprenticeship path for energy auditors and energy specialists yet, but to move people in that direction by, supporting the weatherization industry that's been a really small but mighty program for nearly 50 years now, and to build up what work they're already doing by providing some more education to the contractor side, seeing maybe a larger benefit in the services those contractors can offer at large, and also implicating, hopefully, that as people gain those credentials from the contractor side, maybe they want to get pulled into the network of community action agencies serving communities and find jobs in that way. So it's really like connecting dots between all of these things, and it's massive work right now, but that's one way we've been trying to look at it. Thanks.
From my perspective, it's been a both and. So it's been we have the resources because of this grant. Do you want to be the education partner? Or we need this thing, can you implement it? So that's what's happening with NEVI funding and EVSE programming with this system. And so, or it's folks coming to us with specific needs around, like, we don't see our communities represented in the current workforce. Can you help us build a program with our community to demonstrate that? And so that part of it has been completely grassroots and funded by industry and led by industry a lot in the specific instance I'm thinking of. And so it really depends. I think there's I guess there's just not enough maybe like clear tendrils that are touching enough points. Like the octopus maybe only has enough fingers to touch the certain amount of places. And so it's just who sees the grant, who is intuitive enough to apply the grant, and then who has a connection that knows that they're active participants in this economy and work.
And maybe if I could follow up on that question too. So as we're thinking about these kind of regional convenings that we're going to be doing, where we'll be trying to bring LMI data on like what the needs are of the areas, what would be most helpful for you all to try to help like connecting those octopus arms or really kind of helping to bring together, because I think we're thinking through who the partners are, the general outcomes, things like that. But I think also if there's feedback that you all have on like how the state could be playing the most effective role, that would be really helpful for us to hear too, because I think we're really seeing our role right now is ideally bringing partners together in a meaningful way to help make those connections. But if you all have thoughts on like things, places that you see gaps or things where we could be most helpful and effective as we're kind of bringing, conceiving and pulling together these new opportunities, please let me know. And also if that's something that you or your organization wants to be involved in, that would be very helpful for us or for me to know too.
Logan, I like your analogy with the octopus. So I have felt like that for like 6 months now, maybe longer. So I think anything you can do to help understand how these different departments align and the potential of working together, and just, I think that's been probably one of the biggest things to chase. There's so much happening. And then as technology changes, the training's going to change. So I think more conversations, more connecting, helping to, maybe it's even a simple visual that I haven't seen out there yet. So.
I haven't either. And that's helpful to kind of be thinking about as we try to, I think some of the things that we're going to try to do too is like build some toolkits and best practices and like things like that, potentially visuals and other things. So that would be great. Oh, and the modeling around CTE pathways applied to the data. So that's actually specifically some of the things that we're getting TA for as part of this grant. So I think, yes, that I'm glad to hear that that would be very helpful. And I think we'll probably try to find ways to have more engagement and feedback loop opportunities along the way as we are building some of this out as well.
The CTE pathways are also in our SLED, application to look at those pathways too for the workforce analysis.
And as of this week at a national level, energy is a pathway. So
Wow.
at the national level.
Yeah. Oh, Tim just put it in.
I think one of the other things that we've seen too, especially in our space as an on-ramp, right? We're a pipeline and a gateway kind of as a pre-apprenticeship training program, understanding that what we're training for may not land immediately into some of those most needed positions. And so I think having employers understand that if they're fully going to engage workforce, that they have to have the pipeline as well. And they have to be willing to look at some of those entry-level positions. We know that we're going to be doing training, but that they're going to need more work. Graduates are going to need more work experience and more training on top of it. So understanding kind of where the opportunities are from an employer's perspective.
It's all, yeah, very helpful. Well, I think, support around teacher licensures. Yes, hear you on that. There's a lot of work on teacher training happening kind of all over the place. One thing that the GWDB is likely going to be partnering with P20 on is trying to use our education sector committee under the GWDB to bring together a lot of the folks that are working on different teacher training and teacher pipeline work, because I think that's another place that there's a lot of tentacles all over the place, but not necessarily coming together. And so that's, again, a big role that we see as the Governor's Workforce Development Board, is trying to be a place that brings conversations together to get to the actions that are needed to be happening. I frequently say that we have a lot of silos of excellence in our state. And so a big role for us moving forward is trying to kind of break down those silos and get people together and play that convening role to support collaboration. I also hope that this can be like the start of a discussion for us all and not just like one-time presentation, but Molly and I do really want to get feedback on this. We want to be sure that things that we're pulling together are going to be useful and helpful. I will make sure to add my email on this too, and hopefully before we send the slides out, and hopefully soon I will have a couple additional people on my team that are really just focused on this work specifically too, to be able to dive in and be more of a day-to-day point of contact for you. So yeah, I would just say thank you so much. I know we're almost at time, and if there's any other questions, like, we're here and happy to engage in discussions. Molly, I don't want to speak for you, but
I'm also here and happy to engage in discussions.
yeah, I'm saying we because I knew it, but it's just wanted you to confirm for yourself. Well, Logan,
Yeah, thank you, Logan, for
there's any-
inviting us.
Yeah, for Chloe closing us out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, y'all. So the Minnesota Energy Consortium will also be on this work with you and happy to respond. So we currently lead that. I'm looking for industry and education partners to be more involved with that. But that's part of why this group exists and it was brought together, and then it's just being rebuilt a little bit. And so we're in our we're getting our makeover right now, essentially. And so happy to continue this work and would always want this conversation to continue. So thank you so much for your time today, y'all. Any last comments, questions from anyone? Sweet. Thank you. I'm gonna stop that recording. Have a good day, y'all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.